So as I mentioned, I am so excited to introduce our speakers today. Not only are they amazing coaches, but they are also my teachers from core training. So I couldn't be more excited or more proud to introduce them. We have Joe Lanigan, an inspirational trainer and coach. And we also have Evan Spargo, who is a high impact mindset coach and trainer. And we also have Sarah Devereaux, who is an accomplished trainer of coaches who brings over a decade of knowledge and wealth of experience to her trainees. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the microphones to our lovely speakers for today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lana, for that beautiful introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located. We're so excited for you to join us in today's event. And my name's Sarah Devereaux, and together with my incredible colleagues, Joe Lanigan and Evan Spargo, we're going to share with you how the mindset of a professional coach and also the practice of transformative coaching extends far beyond a coaching conversation itself. Okay, and how you'll notice that it actually creates a domino effect of positive change in our lives and also in the lives of those that we encounter. Now, our hope is that in this webinar, that it will inspire you to kind of infuse your world with positive psychology and create a glass half full perspective. Secondly, that you'll learn how to create more connection and more empowerment within your personal and professional relationships. And lastly, we'd love for you to take home some practices that you can actually implement in your own lives so that you can really begin to engage in more meaningful conversations. So in order for you to get the most out of this webinar, we'd really encourage you to join us with an open heart and also an open mind. And most importantly, a willingness to reflect upon yourself and how it is that you operate in your day-to-day life. So, as human beings living in our modern society, we do live in such a fast-paced world without too much time for pause and reflection. And as a mother of three, a wife, a coach, a business owner, I get it. Like you, I play many roles, and I know that when I'm not conscious about it, it's easy to get bogged down and kind of caught in a reactive pattern of just going through the motions or living life on autopilot. And so in our session today, we hope that this will allow you the space and the time to reflect upon your own perception and the way that you see the world. So we'll be sharing with you some stories that will really draw the parallel between the beauty and the magic that we all know happens within a coaching conversation, and how we can take these ways of being and integrate them into our own spheres of influence. So, I truly believe that by stepping back and gaining insight into the way that we're perceiving ourselves, but also the way that we're perceiving a situation, we can ask ourselves whether this perception is actually serving us. We can begin to become aware of the impact that it's having. And when we do this, what happens? Well, we enter into the realm of making conscious choices. Okay, so these awarenesses provide an opportunity for us to update our inner landscape, to adjust our view of the world, to make bolder choices with more freedom, and really step into creating a new way of being. So, To begin with, I want to introduce to you one of Coachmasters Academy's transformative coaching principles derived from positive psychology, which says direct the mind towards what is positive and possible. Now, in a coaching conversation, as many of you know, we are conscious about ensuring our client's mind is geared in the direction of what is positive and also what is possible, so that creativity, empowerment, possibility are at the forefront of the conversation. And so to explain the essence of this principle, I just want to share with you a concept from positive psychology called loss frame and gain frame. Now, I do want to preface that, for those of you who may not have learned too much about positive psychology is not just about positive talk. It is so much more than that. And, it's about identifying strength and focusing on what we want and recognizing what is already working and, doing more of what lights us up and enables us to actually flourish as individuals. So what we need to understand here is that for any given situation, we'll tend to either look at things from a gain frame, which, like this metaphor that many of you have probably come across before, it means a glass half full. Or we can look at things from a loss frame, which means a glass half empty perspective. Now, I'd like to get a little bit of engagement here from you all. So if you can maybe pop in the chat box, what do you think are some of the core characteristics of people who look at a situation from a glass half empty or a lost frame? How do we know that they're in a lost frame? Let's see. Who wants to pop something in the chat? How do we know when someone's in a lost frame? They feels less pessimistic. Yeah, what else? Pessimistic about their situation. Great. Not enough, their attitude, maybe a victim mentality, past focused. Lost frame when a person is negative and wants to give up. It's all my fault. There are doubts, there are worries, absolutely, okay. Yeah, so with a lost frame, it's quite evident that their perspective is not one of empowerment. It is focused on the negative, what isn't working, what they don't want, what they don't like, what shouldn't be. Very often their minds can be very, very busy with thinking about all the negative what if things that may actually occur. Or may not actually occur, I should say. And so what about a gain frame then? How do we know that somebody is in a gain frame, in a glass half full perspective? What are some of their characteristics that we'd notice? How do we know someone is in a gain frame? A solution focus. This is temporary. This too shall pass. Yeah, so a bit of perspective. They talk about opportunities. They see opportunities. They say things like, I can do this. They see what might be possible. Absolutely. Can you see that there's such a different flavor? There's also open-mindedness coming through. They're open to changing their perspective. Yeah, great. Optimism, acknowledging the challenges, but keeping moving forward. Fantastic. You've got it. You've got it. So, I want to ask you today, and if we can maybe go back to the slides, is, how is it that you see the world? I really want you to take a moment and reflect upon your own perspective right now. Even what is your ratio? I quite like to think about it like this. Like, what is your own personal ratio between the time that you spend focusing and talking about what you want versus the amount of time or energy that you spend complaining or thinking about the things that you don't want? It's a really significant, important question to ask ourselves, because it's an actual skill to become self-aware enough in the moment and reflect upon what frame of mind we're in. You see, awareness actually precedes change. And I know for myself that when I'm feeling, stressed or fearful or nervous about something, I can quite easily end up, just in the negative spiral, reacting to the situation that I'm faced with. And over the years, I've learned, but I'm still learning, always still learning, so I'm quiet enough in that moment to recognize my own mindset and the impact that it's not only having on me, but also the impact that it's having on those around me. And self-awareness in the moment is such a key to stopping that negative spiral. And when I stop, when I pause, when I breathe, I can then gain some insight into the way that I'm operating, and it allows me to be choiceful. It allows me to choose something different. So I'm going to pass it over to Jo now, who is going to take you through some really wonderful stories that will help kind of deepen this illustration between the parallel between a coaching conversation and how we can bring that magic into our own lives. So over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome to everybody. It's so wonderful to have you all here. So I'm going to tell you a few stories. And before I do, I just want to say that I think that life for all of us is a constant journey of learning to become the true essence of who we are, our true, authentic, and aligned selves. Now, I thought as an MCC, a master certified coach, that I would have it all figured out, that the better the coach I was, the better the person I would be. And I soon realized that it was about becoming, that it was a journey and it will be forever unless I choose to stop this discovery of self-learning. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand. Okay, I have grown enormously since becoming a coach and have endeavored to take many of the principles of coaching into my daily life. But today, I want to be really vulnerable and honest with you, and maybe you'll relate to some of my stories. So I first want to talk to you about responding versus reacting. And in a coaching session, we as the coach, if we become triggered or we just don't know what to say next, we've learned to breathe, pause, and give ourselves time. So why is that so hard to do when life throws us a curveball? Now, I want to tell you of a situation that happened a short while ago, and I'll preface it with the fact that I am not good when it comes to technology. It's a real trigger for me. Now, I had a major challenge the other day with technology. And on top of that, I was really under the gun with time pressure also. And I need to tell you that I did not respond, but I reacted by absolutely freaking out. So I called my dear friend, Evan, who you know, and Evan could have also been easily panicked, but he kept the mindset of a coach. during a very stressful situation. He spoke slowly and calmly. He was saying, I'm here to help. We're going to get through this. You're not alone. And he just kept saying this, and I was then able to calm down. Now, we fixed the problem, and in the end, it turned out not to be a problem at all. And I am so appreciative to Evan for his presence on that day. He brought his coaching presence into a real life stressful situation. Now, I tried to figure out what was it that made me so anxious. And I thought I'd look at my values. So my value of responsibility was at play. I had a responsibility to others. I didn't want to let anyone down. My value of excellence was in jeopardy. I always want to do my best, especially when it comes to others. So I really needed to process how I had reacted rather than just letting this situation slip by without me learning from it. Now that I'm aware of the values that were at play here, I'm really hoping that the next time I get stressed out when a similar situation comes along, that I'll be able to recognize how my values had been triggered and breathe, pause, and give myself time to respond rather than react. Now for another story. In a coaching conversation, we listen for what the client is trying to express without us as coaches trying to fix the situation. We aren't to have all the answers. And I've trained myself to do that in a coaching session, to listen 80% of the time and talk 20% of the time. So why is it so hard to do this in my daily life? Why do I slip back into my default patterns sometimes? Now, I do want you to remember I have grown a lot, and slipping back into my default is a lot less now than it used to be. So my default is I like to be in control. And with that comes the fact that I like to be right. And my advice is going to be very helpful. Can anyone relate to this? Now, I have a niece that I'm very close to. This situation happened a little while back, but I thought it would be quite relevant to our discussion. She had a really good business, and she came to me one day and said she was going to give up her business and start another. I immediately said, that was not a good idea. You've just bought a house, you have a big mortgage, you need to stay where you are because you already have the security. Don't give up what's already working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Needless to say, she didn't listen to my advice. She started her new business and went on to become a whole lot more successful than if she had listened to me. I tried to fix the situation for her instead of doing what we do as coaches, which is trusting and respecting that she was whole and creative and resourceful and could come up with her own strategies and her own solutions. That is the mindset of a coach. Now, luckily, she obviously had the strength of conviction to move forward without my advice. And I'm so glad she was able to empower and respect herself. So, what values were at play here? My value of love, my value of financial security. I love her and I wanted the best for her. But that's not how it appeared. if I could have recognized that those values were feeling threatened, I might have listened 80% of the time instead of talking at her 80% of the time and trying to fix the problem for my niece. Now, lastly, I want to talk to you about judgment versus curiosity. We're taught to adopt a mindset of curiosity in a coaching conversation, as opposed to judging and coming up with our own interpretations or deductions, which leads to leading the conversation in the direction that we think it should go so we can solve the problem. Our first instinct when we're setting out on our coaching journey is to immediately go to judging, deducing, or interpreting from our own beliefs, our own values, and our own life experience. But over time, we work very hard to come from a mindset of curiosity. What happens when it comes to everyday life? Well, it can go out the window. Judging other people can be a struggle for almost all of us on a daily basis. We can find ourselves judging others in a variety of ways, from how someone looks to how they act, and more. Unless we're able to change our mindset to one of curiosity, we will continue to make up stories in our minds about other people and judge them without validity. I came across this story the other day, and this is not my story, and it simply broke my heart, and it reminded me of an important lesson. Never judge a person until you know exactly what made them the way they are. So the story goes like this. My mom had only one eye. I hated her. She was such an embarrassment. She cooked for the students and the teachers at my school to help support our family. There was this one day during elementary school where my mom came to say hello to me, and I was so embarrassed. How could she do this to me? I gave her a hateful look and I ran out. And the next day at school, one of my classmates said to me, "Oh, your mom only has one eye." I wanted to bury myself. I also wanted my mom to just disappear. And I confronted her that day and I said, "If you're only going to make me a laughingstock, why don't you just die?" My mom didn't respond. I didn't even stop to think a second about what I had said because I was full of anger. I was oblivious to her feelings. I really wanted out of that house and have nothing more to do with her. So I studied real hard in high school, and then I got a chance to study abroad. When I got back from overseas from finishing university, I got married, I bought a house of my own, I had kids of my own. I was really happy with my life, my kids, and my comforts. Then one day my mother came to visit me. She hadn't seen me in years, and she hadn't even met her own grandchildren. When she stood at the door, my children laughed at her. And I yelled at her for coming over uninvited. I screamed at her, "How dare you come to my house and scare my children? Get out of here now." And to this, my mother quietly answered, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have gotten the wrong address." And she disappeared out of sight. One day, a letter regarding a school reunion came to my house. So I lied to my wife and told her I was going on a business trip. After the reunion, I thought I'd go back to the old shack where I grew up, just out of curiosity. My neighbors said that my mom had died, and I didn't shed a tear. They handed me a letter that she had wanted me to have. It said, "My dearest son, I think of you all the time. I'm sorry that I came to your house and that I scared your children. I was so glad when I heard you were coming for the reunion, but I may not be able to even get out of bed to see you. I'm so sorry that I was a constant embarrassment to you when you were growing up. You see, when you were very little, you got into an accident and you lost your eye. As your mother, I couldn't stand watching you having to grow up with one eye, so I gave you mine. I was so proud of my son, who was seeing a whole new world for me in my place with that eye. With all my love to you, your mother." Please take what you have learned from your coaching and bring it into your daily lives. Think of the impact that your knowledge will have on others if before reacting, before judging, you breathe, pause, and look for authenticity and truth. I'm going to finish with an acronym, which is STOP. STOP. See the other person. And I'm going to hand it over to Evan now to bring it all together.
Thank you very much, Jo. Powerful, inspiring, and such a great reminder for us all how powerful our ability and our principles of coaching can apply in everyday lives. And it's just beautiful. What a beautiful message that we got there. Now, what I want to talk about is how we can bring this all together. And there's a couple points here I want to go through. And the first is being mindful of our ratio, because what we focus on and talk about expands. And I'll share a little bit of a story around this too, since we're all doing a bit of storytelling time. A couple of months ago, I was in a pretty low state. Now, I'm usually an optimistic person, usually pretty positive, but this is a state where I was pretty low. I was in a downward spiral and felt very victimized. And I kept staying in this state. It was really hard for me to get out. And I'm lucky enough to have one of my best friends who I've known for years, and she's a coach. And I just said, look, I need a chat. And we started talking, we were on the phone, and there was so much resistance within me. I just couldn't see the upside. I kept telling her what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. And as much as she kept trying at it, trying to keep going, trying to uncover it, the worse and worse that I got. It was like my ego was against her, and my ego is really, really strong sometimes. It doesn't want to let go. It doesn't want to let up. And then as I kind of got it out of my system, I was pretty emotional. I was angry and just nothing in life was working for me. She said to me, so what is it that you actually want here? What would you like to have happen? And then I was just like, oh, well, I want this to happen. I want this to happen. And I want to be like this. And I tell you what, in that moment, after just talking about what I wanted, because I didn't actually think about what I wanted, I was just telling her absolutely everything that was going wrong, I started to feel a bit better. And what was really funny is my close friends, they call me Sparks, right? That's my nickname, Sparks. And there's a bit of a persona around it. It's the positive, it's the optimistic guy that gets stuff done and achieves this and that. And it's kind of like I've disconnected to that. And she said to me, how do you want to show up from now on? I said, I want to be Sparks again. I want to be me. And then when I claimed that, it's just like all this pressure just went off me. And I just saw the possibilities again. The energy came back, the inspiration, the motivation came back, all because I shifted the way what I was talking about. I shifted my frame of reference. And so the whole point of this is we need to be mindful of the ratio we talk about of what's positive and possible versus negative and going wrong. So as Sarah was talking about, the gain frame and the loss frame. If we continue to focus on the loss frame in our conversations, then we will continue to go down that rabbit hole where it becomes more challenging to come out and back into a positive frame of mind, which clearly I was in. And I was in there for a couple of weeks, to be honest. I was really struggling to get out because we run the risk of exacerbating the issue into something bigger than it is, losing sight of what really matters. And it also affects our perception to one that is seen as more problematic. And I was seeing my situation as problematic when it really wasn't. Now, if we continue to focus on the gain frame in the majority of our conversations, we'll start to uncover what really matters to us, right? The possibilities will start to appear. The inner strengths will come to the surface. And that's where the greater potential to move towards what we desire starts to come to light. And it's exactly what I went through in that conversation. As soon as I started talking about what I wanted, that all came back to me. Now, for some tips of how to be mindful of our ratio is number one, we set an intention. Because where attention goes, energy flows. So if we make a promise to ourselves, we set intention at the start of the day, I'm going to focus on what I want. I'm going to focus on what's possible because I know that's what's going to create the future that I want. That's going to stay true to who I am. Set an intention. Another thing is speaking of what we want versus don't want. Prime example before, I was talking about what I don't want the whole time. And I went in this downward spiral, just kept going down. We need to be able to listen to our language. Listen, I want you to think about, imagine yesterday, what happened yesterday? Was I talking predominantly about what I don't want? Or was I talking predominantly about what I want? We need to listen to our language and catch ourselves in the moment. Wow, I'm actually talking about what I don't want. It doesn't feel good within me. You can usually feel it in your heart. So in that moment, have a moment of awareness, pause and be like, I wonder if I shift it here to what is it I do want? I wonder what difference that will make. And then you watch yourself climb out and start to fly again. Right? So listen to what we talk in our inner dialogue. Now, another one that I wanted to bring up was being mindful of consumption and proximity. All right. So this is all about what we're consuming in our daily lives, what's in our environment, what's around us. Now, a lot of us are aware, and we've heard this before, about you are the 5 people you hang around most. We are who we surround ourselves with. And they did a study at Harvard on how an individual social network affects their happiness levels. So they found that individuals who associate themselves with cheerful people and have a happy demeanor, and consequently a better sense of well-being, the effects of one person's happiness influences another person's mood, which boosts another person's mood, and it becomes a chain reaction. And it's the same way around. If you come in with a positive, happy mood, the other person you're speaking to in your life, whether it's your partner, your friends, your work colleagues, they're going to affect that too. So be mindful of who you surround yourself with, the energy that they bring in. Another one is the media, right? Our subconscious is always listening. Whether we like it or not, it's always on. Right from the morning to even when we're sleeping, our subconscious is always listening. And we need to be mindful of what it's listening to. One big culprit is the news. Honestly, I don't watch any news at all. If there's something major that's happening, someone will tell me. Is if we continually take in negative news, we hear the discrimination that's happening in the world. If we look at social media and we compare ourselves, it's going to affect our mood. And it's going to affect about what we talk about and ultimately what we start seeing around us. We're going to start seeing what we're hearing. We're going to start seeing the negativity. We're going to start picking out what's going wrong for us in society, and that's going to bring us down. Now, we can't always avoid it. Like, that's just real. We're human. But if we keep in mind the people we surround ourselves with, the environment that we create, what we're consuming, it can influence us. And if we can surround ourselves with something that's positive, it's inspiring, kind, empathetic, we can learn and build knowledge for ourselves, then we keep ourselves in better stead. And also for the ones around us. Because when we have an intention to inspire ourselves and find what's positive and possible for us, we inspire those around us to do the same. We inspire our partners, we inspire our work colleagues, our children, our friends. Keep that in mind. Now, another one that we talk about here is 80% listening, 20% talking. And another acronym I'll give you is WAIT. Why am I talking? Right? A good rule of thumb when coaching our clients is to keep a ratio of around 80% of the talking done by the client and 20% done by the coach. So this really ensures that our clients have the space to speak and be heard fully. Okay. If you are to do most of the talking, then a couple of questions arise. Number one, is whom we are talking to have the space to fully open up and express themselves? Right? Are they getting that opportunity? Another way to look at it is what we are saying having an influence on who we are talking to and what they want to say? If we are constantly projecting onto the other person, how is that going to influence them? Are they going to be able to speak freely, to speak with vulnerability, to speak with openness? Are we projecting ourselves? Are we being intimidating? Are we drowning the person? Because most often people in our lives, they don't necessarily want a solution. They just want someone to listen to them. They just want an open space. You think about it when you're in a situation, you want to get something off your chest. You don't want to be told what to do. You just want someone to hear you, acknowledge you, not to judge you, and just to be with you and sit with you. And that's enough. Sometimes you need to communicate that to people. And as coaches, we need to understand that too about others. So what can we do? In the moment, we can ask ourselves, wait, why am I talking? If there's no reason to talk, we can simply be present, we can be patient, and be silent. And if we believe there is something more to be covered, we can ask simple questions like, tell me more. Tell me more about this. Or what else? We want to get into the habit of asking open-ended questions, just like we do in coaching, not just evoking one-word answers, but allowing people to space to open their mind. It's like, let's be like children. What do children do? They ask a million questions and it gets annoying, but tell you what, it sparks insight, it sparks curiosity and thought-provoking, because we start to think about all these things we didn't think about, because children are not afraid to ask questions. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is listen to understand. And this is honestly the backbone of coaching. It's what it's what it's all about. Now, we realize we don't have to be dominating a conversation all the time. Okay, that's something we've said. We know this. And there is value in allowing people who we're talking to fully express themselves. But what is it that we're actually listening for? A common habit of people, which is often unconscious while listening to another person, is to think, I wonder what I'm going to say next. How am I going to contribute to this? Or how am I going to respond to what they're saying? Rather than actually listening to what the other person is saying. It's like, when we start as coaches, when we start our learning journey, how many of you, and I'm a big culprit of this, when we're starting our coaching journey and we're listening to our client, I'm thinking about, oh my God, what am I going to ask them? What's the question I'm going to ask them? I've got no idea, right? We've all gone through that, yeah? And that was me at the start, because I was just so worried about my own performance rather than actually listening to the client. And what I found was that when there was a certain trust in myself, and I listened to actually the client, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, the question just came naturally because there was a certain trust, and there was a certain trust that I could hear what the client was saying. And then that's when a question arises. That's when the inquiry arises, because we listen. We listen from not only from our ears, but our heart. We bring that in, we show that we are listening, and we can capture all the details that we need, right? One way we can improve our listening is to have that intention to understand, right? To learn about the person. Come in with curiosity, with empathy, to acknowledge what life may be like in their lens, like Joe was saying, right? With the stop. This will help us dispel judgment in the moment. A mindset of curiosity, just like kids don't judge, they just ask questions. Bring that childlike curiosity. Be empathetic, acknowledge. One of my favorite things to do as a coach, and this is what I teach a lot of my students, is that acknowledge the person. I hear you, I see you, I know what you're feeling, I understand. I want to acknowledge your efforts, your ability to be vulnerable, your openness. Thank you so much for sharing this space with me. Geez, doesn't that make you feel good when you hear that? Doesn't that make you feel like you want to open up more? It makes you feel like you've been heard, right? Acknowledge their efforts, acknowledge the attitude and values, acknowledge the subject that they're talking about, that it's important to them. People in your life, your family, your friends, your work colleagues, they're opening up to you. Acknowledge that it is important for them. What a way to improve and connect with these people more, by acknowledging them, right? We also want to listen for what is it they're trying to work out here. And in CMA, we talk this about the presenting issue. What are you trying to resolve, express, explore? What are you trying to work through? Because if you can bring that up and listen for that, and you give it back to you, the person you're talking to, geez, it makes it more clear for them, to help them understand. Because so much when people are emotional, they're just talking and they're just spitting it all out. They actually don't know what they're saying. We help them grasp that. And importantly, we can listen for what is it that they actually want. What is it that they desire? The expression of desire, as we say here at CMA. When you capture that, that's when we can get back into that positive frame. We start seeing possibilities, because at the end of the day, buried underneath the person that we're talking to, our clients, our friends, our family, this buried underneath all this content and all this story is something we call an expression of desire, a want, a need, something that they want. We just need the space for them to slowly, everything just dissolve, so we can uncover what is it we want. Because in our lives, there's always something there that we want. Sometimes we just don't know how to express it. So let's help the people we're talking to find that expression of desire. Because when they connect to what they want and what's important for them, watch them shift, watch them change, and you can reckon that to a transformative coaching conversation. And that's why we get onto the expression of desire. That's why we uncover the expression of desire, because that's where the shift happens. Because most often people lose sight of what they want. Let's bring that to life by listening. If we can offer all these back to the people that we're talking to, it demonstrates we are far more interested in learning to understand them. They feel heard, and it gives them an opportunity to see themselves. How many people in their lives have people who can actually mirror back what they're saying without having a vested interest or a bias or wanting to give an opinion or give advice? There's not many. So we can be the leaders of that. We can be the leaders mirroring back what people can't see about themselves. We can provide space for them to learn more about themselves, how they see the world, and become more aware of things that they weren't consciously aware of. The skill that we have as coaches goes beyond a coaching conversation. It can filter in to your everyday lives, to the people that you love, to the people that you work with. And this is a legacy that you can create and you can give to these people. And the best thing about it is they can be inspired by you and they can give it to them, to other people. And then we create this ripple effect of positive change. But it all starts from you, your mindset of curiosity, your ability to bring empathy and to connect with those around you. And that's the message we want to give for you today. And on behalf of Sarah, myself, and Joe, we just want to thank you for being here and for joining us in this session. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Evan, Sarah, and Joe. Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful talk. And, you know, I took away so much from that talk. And the two pieces that really stood out for me was that stop and wait. And it really, those are tools that I'm going to remind myself constantly as I speak to others, and most especially my mother. And so I'd like to use this opportunity now to maybe facilitate some Q&A and invite some of our attendees. Maybe they have some questions that they would like to ask our speakers, or maybe some insights that they'd like to bring to the table. Please feel free to just unmute yourselves or even raise your hand if there is something that you would like to ask one of our speakers. It seems as everyone is still just simmering in all the wonderful insights that you've shared. Yes, Andy, I see your hand.
Hi, everyone. Something that resonated with me was where intention goes, energy flows, and deliberately setting an intention. And this can be something very, very small about the language that we use, or about our ratio of glass half full or glass half empty. I found that really helpful, and that's my takeaway today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Andy. And I see, Helen, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I wonder how, or just some advice on how to remain curious, how to remain in that curious mind, and stop that judging, because I think it's just such a typical thing that we just, you know, it's human nature. So I'm really interested in some thoughts on how as coaches we can ensure we remain curious.
Joe, Evan, or Sarah, would you like to maybe perhaps answer Helen's question?
Thanks, Helen. I would love to share. So, you know, curiosity, at least for myself, is about being genuinely interested. And if I'm genuinely interested in the person and what it is that they have to say, and what is their perspective, and, you know, what is up for them, what values are guiding them, and if I'm really genuinely interested in that person, I feel like I naturally listen at a deeper level. And curiosity for me means that judgment can't exist. I can't judge someone and be genuinely curious about them at the same time. So I guess it's a mindset of, you know, genuine interest. Yeah, that's what I would like to share on that. And I'm not sure if Evan or Joe, there's anything else you'd like to add.
I saw that somebody who is quite wonderful just said, maybe we can reframe the question, what is required for me to be curious? And I think, again, it's what we're taught about observing and not making our own interpretations and our own deductions. And it's really stopping and seeing the other person without judgment and coming from a place of curiosity. And Evan, you might want to add something, because I felt what you were saying earlier just about children and you know, that was such a beautiful analogy.
Yeah, I just think that we can learn so much from children. They're the curiosity that they bring. They're just not afraid to ask questions, and they don't judge. They'll ask you a question, you'll answer it, and they'll ask, oh, why is that? Oh, why is that? And they'll continue. And sometimes, look, it gets annoying, but then you feel heard and you start to think about things you never really thought about. And you can gain so much inspiration from that, having that childlike curiosity. I just want to learn about you. And I think that's all it is. Having that mindset, I just want to learn. I want to learn about you. And the more I learn about you, you know what? I'm going to learn a lot about myself in the process of doing that. I think if we can keep that, look, it is quite difficult and challenging at times because we do have a natural reaction, but having the intention to learn, you start to develop empathy and compassion for another person. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen, for that wonderful question. And I see Manju, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a thought came to me while, with regards to this question of curiosity. Sometimes we need to kind of think of the other person as whole and resourceful, and us being curious to find out what it is that makes them tick. And that would kind of set us off on that journey of curiosity is what I was thinking while you were speaking. But if I may add one more thing, please. Just wow, the session was fantastic. And a big thank you to all three of you. And while you were speaking and while Evan was winding up, a picture came to my mind, and if I may share that, I'm now seeing myself as that little pebble that drops into the water that can create that ripple, and a good ripple in a way. And if each of us did that, like I can see there are 46 of us are here, and if each of us did that, what a difference that would make towards, guiding everybody to look at what's positive and possible, and the world would definitely be a better place. I just wanted to share that thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manju. And I'm also seeing Alma has her hand raised and Emily as well. So maybe we can have Alma come to the floor first.
Yeah, I well, first of all, I really thank the speakers. They're all very good and excellent. But one thing that resonated with me, and I'm just starting with the CMA methodology and structure, although I have coached and I've used, some things in the past like listening. But what I heard differently today is that, or I also heard it from Ben in the past 2 weeks, that when we listen, it's not enough that we listen with our ears, but we have to listen to understand. And, when you're just starting out, like what Evan said, you keep worrying about what question to ask when the person is speaking, and then you lose what actually the person wants and desires. And when you touch that desire, when there's an expression of desire, and I think that's what's very important to listen for, rather than worrying about yourself, because he says it comes naturally if you're not worried about how you're performing. And I also like the fact that it's important to create curiosity, empathy, and acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is something that I heard today. When you acknowledge their values, their beliefs, their vulnerability, and then listen for what they need. And to me, that is very important, because listening for me is very difficult. I must admit that, because when we're logical, sometimes we forget to listen from the heart. And once we listen from the heart, we're able to connect with the client. And I think energy flows. Just like that. Thank you so much for the learning.
Thank you, Alma. And before we move on to Emily, I'd just like to maybe invite everyone to just read what's the conversation that's happening in the chat box around curiosity, and how reframing the question, what is required of me to get curious, helps resolve the two tensions of perhaps assuming that you don't have curiosity and where you might need to find curiosity. And so there are wonderful insights that are happening in the chat box. So please go take a look at that. And Emily, if you are ready, we would love to have you come and share your question or insights with us.
Yeah, so mine is a question. This actually is perfect timing, and it's actually gotten me quite emotional because I want to ask the coaches, what about when we feel judged? I had a conversation over the telephone with a friend, and I listened and I acknowledged her feelings and what was going on for her. However, I felt extremely judged, and I really struggled to cope through the conversation, and I didn't know where to go with it or you know, what steps to take. So I'd love some insight because this hasn't been resolved and it keeps coming up, and I'd love to have some help with it.
Well, thank you for that question. So just to clarify, were you the coach on the call?
No, just a friend phoning about a incident between our daughters, and it's been ongoing. Well, it hasn't. I thought it was resolved, but clearly what came from it was this mum is quite hurt about the situation and hurt for her daughter as well. And yeah, so I felt quite judged throughout the whole conversation, listening and acknowledging. And yeah, I wish I was brave enough to say, well, what would you like to have happen? But I didn't feel that I didn't know how it would get received, or it really threw me. So, and I've been thrown a couple of times with this particular friend. She's very strong personality. So yeah, I just would love some guidance around that. And listening to this was perfect. It's going, well, was I curious or was I judging? But at the same time, I felt very judged. So I'd like, to see when we're put in that situation with a friend or family member, what to do.
Well, thank you for that question. And I, before I pass it on to my speakers, I guess you mentioned the word resolve, and it reminded me of what our speakers shared with us earlier, responding versus reacting. And I'm also curious around what feelings could you connect to during that moment, and perhaps what aspect of you was not feeling good about those conversations. But of course, I would love to hand it over to our speakers if they would love to handle this question. Anyone?
Well, I'm just looking in the chat box and I see Dr. Ben Coe has put some really interesting self-reflection type questions in here for you, Emily. So Ben, I'm not sure if you would like to elaborate on this more verbally, or Emily, if what is in here might give you some insight into what is happening for you internally. Yeah, and as Ben said here, get curious on the above questions.
Yeah. I'm on my phone, so I can't really see the conversation so easily, which is a problem. Let me bring it up. There we go. My feelings can I connect to in the moment? Yes. Yeah.
And something that I was just thinking, the questions that Ben is putting out there are so important. And it's like what we were talking about earlier. Do you respond or do you react? And if we can, in the moment, say, wow, what's going on for me right now? You know, what value is happening for me right now? And I'm feeling threatened. What value is that? And take the time, just as we do in a coaching conversation, to pause, to breathe and reflect. And if that is not going to work in the conversation at the moment, well, maybe you just need to continue the conversation later after you've processed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Sarah, for
Thank
the
you.
question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, great, great. I'm not turning on the camera because it's just I wasn't prepared to come for the session, but I guess the questions that Emily has raised was very useful, and I think Joe and Aaron has offered quite a good building block on how we can, as coaches, turn that situation around and and see what we can learn from it. So like Joe mentioned, the first aspect is really taking the time to pause. That's where we actually allow the transition from a reactive state to a more receptive state. And that's the critical part. If we don't pause, then it makes it very difficult to continue the coaching process, mainly because the mind in a reactive state is less in tune towards curiosity, right? So when the mind is not in a curious mode, the opposite is true. It is on a judgment mode. That means while your friend is judging you and you feel judged, you actually judge yourself, because the reactive mind tends to be more analytical in nature, and henceforth a defense mechanism might be activated, and henceforth you want the mind actually triggers it to take a critical look at what is occurring, right? And because the critical mind is not tapping onto the meaning base, henceforth it cannot learn. So the pause is the critical, most critical first move. Once the pause happens, then we can redirect our attention to get curious by simply trick our mind, trick as in TRICK, by inserting questions so that it will not start to evaluate on fact, but start to search for something. That's the power of question. Okay. And the way we structure the questions becomes critical. How can I do, or what can I do, doesn't cause us to ponder. It causes us to do something about it. So it then creates a escape route to get into a reactive state. So your pause amounts to nothing right now when you insert a wrong series of inquiry syntax. So to get the mind to ponder during the receptive state of the mind, would be great if you turn all the questions into what? Like, what feeling can I connect to in that moment? And when you're able to kind of like connect to that feeling, you actually gradually redirect that attention towards insight rather than what can I do about it, which is basically outside. Outside as in OUTSIGHT, okay, versus inside, okay, which INSIDE, right? So what feeling can I connect to, turn it to insight? And then when I connect to the feeling, that means you glue yourself to the object that you are trying to examine, which is the key to all observation. You need to glue yourself to one point. You can't just scan it throughout. You can't just scan the entire space. You need to glue yourself to one point first. That's the basic rule of observation. Glue yourself to one point. So you glue yourself to the feeling and then insert the second process. What thoughts are going through my mind? And that's where that's where the mind starts to start the process of reflecting. And as you ponder on this thought, now that's the most important piece of the secret ingredient. What aspect of me is not feeling good about it? That's where you initiate a learning process that is based on a reflection that is drawn from an insight with a receptive state of mind. Hooray! That's going to be the new program for 2022. When we talk about, inside out approach. Hope you find some gems in this very simple process that I've recently reinvented from my years of therapy works. Instead of doing something to the client, I reverse the process towards what I can use based on a therapy that doing something to me, reverse that into what I can do for myself if I have no one beside me to help me through, to work through those struggles. Okay, back to you.
Thank you so much for that. It is always such a pleasure to have Dr. Ben Coe with us to give us so much more wisdom and insights. So is there anyone else that would like to come on and ask a few more questions before we begin to wrap up our session today? I see that Andy has shared something with us in the chat. Maybe you would like to come to the floor and speak with us, Andy?
Oh, I'm really just reframing what I heard Emily's situation was. And I thought that this is really fascinating, because the theme of today's webinar has been, how can we apply the principles of transformative coaching into a wider context and into our daily lives? So Emily's brought the situation. So what if we are emotionally invested in the topic of the conversation, or emotionally invested with the other person that we are having the conversation with? And I guess what I'm hearing from the responses is that, well, everything applies just the same, but just occurs to me that it's much harder in the moment to continue to apply all the principles and strategies simply because we are emotionally invested. We have the need not only to listen, to seek first to understand, but we also have the need ourselves to be listened to and to be understood by the other person. So it's actually a little bit more complicated when we have an emotional investment ourselves in the conversation.
Thank you for that, Andy. So I'm hearing that there is that recognition that we already have the skills brought to us from the coach training, and that we are able to use that with ourselves. It just takes a little bit more time and energy to, as Ben said in the chat, build that muscle so we can take it into our everyday lives. And I see Murray has his hand up. Would you like to come to the floor?
Certainly. I don't have a question. I just want to acknowledge Joe, Evan, and Sarah, and Ben for the heart and the passion they have for coaching and the impact that can have on our lives and the lives of those around us. I just really want to honor you guys. You're amazing, and I'm just so blessed to be part of this CMA family and look forward to many years of growth ahead of us.
Thank you for that, Murray. I think that is a perfect way for us to close our session. So maybe we can give a big round of applause to our speakers for today. And I will go ahead and stop our recording